Hello, Whitkin.
You didn't waste much time.
Listen, there's a small fortune in there. Help yourself.
You're a vulture, Corso. A vulture.
Who isn't in our business?
You'd stoop to anything.
Friki Hodi Baibara? You bet I would.
Unscrupulous. Thoroughly unscrupulous.
Happy hunting.
When people talk about the greatest era in horror history, very few people bring up the 1990s. You know, when I was younger, that would have sounded just about right to me, especially, since I was around in the 80s, living through that previous decade. And I'll tell you what, the 80s had just delivered a horror renaissance. Then we move into the 90s, and there was a big adjustment that was made. But, let's be real, though. How many of our greatest icons were born in the 80s? The legendary slashers, the directors who defined the genre, the actors, and, of course, the scream queens that we all still love to this day. There's no denying it. The 80s were on fire. But can the 90s really compete? Maybe, maybe not. What I do know is that there's one year that played a massive role in shaping my love of horror. A year when the genre was really kicking ass, whether you were watching the latest theatrical release or wandering the aisles of your local video store. That year was 1999. And these are the 10 best horror movies it gave us. 10 films, no compromises, no honorable mentions, just the definitive list of the best horror movies of 1999. Agree or disagree, which honestly I can't imagine anyone disagreeing. Let me know. But let's get into it. All right, first up on the list, we have one of my favorite movies of all time. Based on the Richard Matheson novel from 1958, Stir of Echoes stars Kevin Bacon as blue-collar Chicago family man Tom Winsky, who, after being hypnotized at a neighborhood gathering, begins experiencing terrifying visions and supernatural phenomena. As the haunting grows stronger, Tom becomes obsessed with uncovering the truth behind a missing teenage girl, leading him down a dark and disturbing path that threatens both his sanity and his family. But yeah, amazing movie. But imagine releasing a supernatural thriller about psychic visions and communicating with the dead just weeks after The Sixth Sense changed horror forever. Well, that's exactly what happened to Stir of Echoes, and it may be the biggest victim of bad timing in 1999 horror. But I'll tell you what, Kevin Bacon in this delivers my favorite performance of his whole career, and I just love this movie start to finish. Next on the list, we have Deep Blue Sea. Like Stir of Echoes, Deep Blue Sea has become more beloved over time. Director Renny Harlin, who already had films like Prison and Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, and Die Hard 2 under his belt, handled this one like a pro. This film stars Saffron Burrows, Thomas Jane, Samuel L. Jackson, and LL Cool J as employees of an underwater laboratory working to create genetically enhanced sharks while searching for a cure for Alzheimer's disease. When the sharks outsmart their creators and take control of the facility, a desperate fight for survival begins. Is this a Jaws ripoff? Sure. Does that make it uninteresting or derivative? Hell no! In fact, this delivers one of the greatest unexpected jump scares of all time. But then again, I guess that all good jump scares are unexpected anyway. In Idle Hands, slacker Anton Tobias, played by Devon Sawa, learns the true meaning of idle hands are the devil's playground. When he discovers that his right hand has become possessed by a demonic force thanks to his days spent slacking off and getting high. This hand becomes self-aware and autonomous, starts on its own killing spree. Anton must stop his own hand before it kills again. He does have help from his zombie best friends, but man, a growing list of increasingly bizarre problems show up, and I'm here for it. This is another victim of poor timing, as it was released only days after the Columbine tragedy, and so release was kind of pulled back a little bit because of its violent nature. Though more of a horror comedy than straight horror, this movie delivers some fantastic gore gags, special effects featuring rising stars in the era, like Devon Sawa, Seth Green, Eldon Henson, and Jessica Alba, and it perfectly captures the glossy late 90s horror aesthetic while still maintaining a little bit of grit. If you know nothing about Charles Band's Full Moon Productions during the Kushner-Locke era, you might find the description of blood dolls very bizarre. Actually, even if you were completely familiar with Charles Band's work at the time, you'd probably still think this synopsis is bizarre. A masked millionaire genius seeks revenge against the business partners who betrayed him, using a team of miniature killer dolls and a collection of bizarre inventions to carry out his plans. As the body count rises, his enemies discover that crossing him comes with deadly consequences. Now add the fact that the millionaire has a tiny head attached to a normal-sized body, keeps a rock girl band imprisoned in a cell in his office so they can perform on command, and sprinkle in a little BDSM, and you've got one of Charles Band's wildest movies, and that's saying something. This was actually directed by Charles Band himself, and remains one of my favorites from his entire back catalog. Though Tim Burton was known for his dark and stylistic films, he'd never really made a true horror movie until Sleepy Hollow. This film also signified a major return of gothic horror to theaters. Sleepy Hollow feels like stepping directly into a nightmare fairy tale, and akin to things like The Nightmare Before Christmas and some of his other work. It's not just a horror movie, it's a full gothic experience. And you got your fog, shadows, decapitations are simply part of everyday life. Johnny Depp plays Ichabod Crane, a forensic investigator who, unable to gain favor with his superiors in the city, is sent to upstate New York to Sleepy Hollow to investigate a series of grisly murders. There he finds dark family secrets, local superstition, and the possibility that those superstitions might actually be true. Not only does this movie look incredible, but it also boasts one of the strongest casts in horror history. Johnny Depp, Christina Ricci, Miranda Richardson, Michael Gambon, Ian McDiarmid, Lisa Marie, Christopher Walken, and Sir Christopher Lee, who all bring Washington Irving's classic tale to life. If you weren't around in 1999, it's hard to explain just how convinced we all were that the world was about to end. Whether it was Y2K crashing civilization or Jesus' big return, the apocalypse seemed to be on everybody's mind. With Arnold Schwarzenegger as a former police officer turned burned-out security guard, and Gabriel Byrne as the devil himself, End of Days gives us one hell of a holy war that could signify the end of times. This entry has a different feel from the others on the list so far, because it trades traditional horror atmosphere for action and spectacle, but make no mistake, man, at this core, this is still some pretty solid religious horror. You guys, this is it. This is the one that launched a genre. Yes, I know the Blair Witch Project wasn't technically the first found footage movie ever made, but it was the one that started a movement that remains alive and well today. 3 student filmmakers travel into the Maryland woods to document the local legend of the Blair Witch. After becoming lost and increasingly disoriented, they begin experiencing disturbing events that suggest something unseen is stalking them. And they may not escape the forest alive. And I'll tell you what, this movie arrived at exactly the right time with exactly the right marketing campaign. The internet was still in its infancy, and people weren't nearly as cynical online as they are today. So when reading that this was a true story about missing filmmakers from the marketing, a lot of us actually believed it. I actually remember digging through those primitive-looking websites and reading about Burkittsville and the Blair Witch legend as if it were all completely real. I wasn't especially scared while watching it in the theater until that final scene, man, that actually got me. Apparently I wasn't alone, because a film that was made for roughly $60,000 to $100,000 went on to earn over $250 million worldwide. And one thing is certain, the Blair Witch mythology remains one of my favorite pieces of horror lore ever created, and I hope they keep making more. When I turned on Audition for the first time, I never would have guessed where it would end up. At first, it feels like a romantic drama, then it takes one hell of a dark turn. Widowed film producer Shigeharu Aoyama, played by Ryosho Ishibashi, he stages a fake audition in hopes of finding a new wife. He becomes captivated by a quiet and mysterious young woman, but as their relationship develops, her true nature slowly reveals itself. Asami, played by Ihi Shina, appears tiny, quiet, and completely harmless. This 5'0", 100-and-nothing-pound woman eventually becomes one of the most terrifying figures in horror cinema. Yet even as the film reaches its most disturbing moments, you're never entirely sure who the real monster is. The way Audition builds tension and dread is like a masterclass in filmmaking. For those of you who weren't there, the mid to late 90s were a strange time. Bands like Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails had become cultural phenomena. Disturbing visuals, industrial aesthetics, and grimy music videos were becoming part of mainstream culture. And I think the guys who produced The House on Haunted Hill from 1999 took one look at that trend and ran with it. Amusement park tycoon Stephen Price, played by Jeffrey Rush, and his wife, played by Famke Janssen, invite a group of strangers to spend the night in an abandoned asylum for a chance to win a cash prize. Unfortunately for them, the building turns out to be filled with deadly supernatural forces. The asylum was once home to the infamous Dr. Vandekut, played wonderfully by Jeffrey Combs, whose horrifying experiments left a permanent stain on the building. This setup gave the filmmakers plenty of opportunities to embrace those grimy, industrial visuals that were so popular at the time. Whereas this movie may not have completely stuck the landing, but it does succeed thanks to disturbing imagery, effects, jump scares, plenty of blood, plenty of mayhem throughout the whole thing until that ending. And finally, we arrive at the last film on the list. I saved this one for last because it's my favorite movie of all time. I'm not even joking. Directed by Roman Polanski, the man behind Rosemary's Baby, The Tenant, and The Fearless Vampire Killers, The Ninth Gate is a kind of mystery that gets deeper every time you think you've figured it out. Rare book dealer Dean Corso, played by Johnny Depp, is hired to authenticate a mysterious occult text said to contain the secret to summoning the devil. As he travels across Europe investigating the book's origins, he becomes entangled in a dangerous web of murder, conspiracy, and supernatural forces. And honestly, that synopsis barely even scratches the surface. The atmosphere in this film is absolutely impeccable. The cinematography, the locations, the score, everything works together perfectly. This is the kind of movie that lingers on your mind long after the credits roll, man. In fact, the first time I saw it, which was in theaters, I wasn't even really sure if I liked it, but I could not stop thinking about it. When it hit VHS, I watched it so many times that I'm surprised the tape didn't file a restraining order. The depths of the story, the attention to detail, the performances, everything about it feels richer every time I revisit it. The cast is phenomenal. Johnny Depp, Frank Langella, Lena Olin, and Emmanuel Seigner, along with fantastic supporting performances from horror veterans like Barbara Jefford and Jack Taylor. By the way, Jack Taylor, man, I love that guy. He's in so many Jess Franco movies. Just got to give that guy a hand for, he just passed away recently, and I want to give him a nice round of applause for all of his work. But I'll tell you what, getting back to The Ninth Gate, I've watched this movie more times than almost any other film I own except maybe Ghostbusters, and somehow this gets better every single time I watch it. So that's it. Those are the absolute best films of 1999. You know, I think that's a pretty solid list of movies regardless of the year, and I'm not sure it can compete with a year like 1981 when all those awesome slashers were coming out. But for a year that doesn't get nearly enough hype from horror fans, I'd say this holds its own. And just in case you were wondering, this is the definitive top 10 best movies from 1999. There's absolutely no room for debate. I am right. These are them. Or is there? What did you think? What did I miss? If you think, I can't imagine that you could come up with something better. But let me know, is there a movie that you'd swap out on the list? Like I said, got the comments below, and I'd be interested to see what other movies you guys would add from 1999. Anyhow, thanks again for watching. I do truly appreciate you guys checking it out and your support. Be sure to go visit corpsecollective.com to see what else we've got going on over there. And until next time, I'll catch you later.